Hello, welcome back to another episode of Future Steps Creative. In today's show, we're going to be talking about tips for choosing the right hosting service for your website. So if you're new to this whole system of setting up a website, let's just talk about that. Your website is nothing if you don't have hosting. It is a critical service to have because that's where your website's going to live online. So if you're new to this is what that means, right? So if you do things the way that I teach, which is basically to own your own platform, I use WordPress, right? So with that, you do need to have a hosting provider set up. You need to have your domain name registered somewhere as well. So that could be with the same company or it could be with a separate company. I always recommend going with separate companies so you can always swap and change if, say, you're not happy with whatever aspect of it. And then of course you're going to use those two things come together and you can build your website using WordPress on it. Now, the reason for this episode is actually because I'm actually in the middle of setting up a new hosting for a project that I'm working on. And throughout that process, I was actually making sure that I'm going through and checking all the boxes for me anyway, to make sure that I'm making the right decision. But even then, you need to also just jump in and test things out. And most service providers, most hosting companies actually give you some time to kind of like test out, like not a free trial, but you can ask for your money back. You can end the service and say, look, it just wasn't for me, and you can go elsewhere, right? So it just dawned on me that, you know what, there are a lot of people that are still probably trying to do this on their own, or even if they're getting a website done by somebody else or using a service to set up the website, they might still want to choose their own hosting. The problem is that most people that are not educated about this kind of thing is they go and they choose the cheapest possible hosting, and until you experience the pain, you might not realize why you shouldn't be doing that. Okay, so I'm gonna hopefully give you some tips here that's going to make sense, and that's going to help you with making that decision and not actually experience that pain in the first place, right? So here's what most business owners or new website owners or potential website owners do. They go out there and they start looking for hosting services, and what they'll find is that there's like a whole sea of hosting companies, probably one popping up every day, that is offering like the next cheapest, like rock bottom price. And they think, oh, look, it's a WordPress hosting or it's whatever hosting, I can actually use that for my website. So they go and they sign up for it, and maybe the web designer or whoever they're using doesn't actually realize that, this is a problem because they're probably inexperienced themselves, and or the website owner is trying to set up their own website, which a lot of the cases, that's what I see happening. And then lo and behold, they start running into issues where the website's running slow, or they are running into errors, database connection issues, or the site's just like going down all the time and stuff like that. This is because there are different levels of quality to the hosting provider as well as the hardware in terms of the resources that they allocate to your website, because your hosting is actually the website is being hosted on a server, which is essentially a very large computer with lots of drive space and lots of processing power so that it can actually run many websites, right? So when you go with the rock bottom pricing type of hosting, you're normally on what's called shared hosting, which is the traditional shared hosting, meaning that they have lots and lots of people lumped in to the same hardware that you're sharing these resources with on that server. And oftentimes what you find is that your website isn't getting enough resources allocated to it, because if someone else on that platform is hogging all the resources, like let's say they have a lot more traffic, they're doing something on their website that's just eating up all the resources, it could end up like taking away resources from you and from everyone else that's actually sharing that same space. And that might be okay for you if you're running a hobby website, but if you're doing a mission critical website, you need to make sure that it is reliably running, so that when people come to it to do business or whatever it is that your goal is for that website, that it is always up and running fast, right? Because there's nothing worse than people coming to a website that's running slower, loading very slowly. They'll just turn away from that site, and you also won't be in good stead with Google and all the other search engines that rely on serving up web pages to searches or to people that are searching for things, because the slower websites don't tend to rank in those search results, right? So you're doing yourself a disservice when you do that. So what do you do? Well, I would say go for the better quality hosting. So don't go for the ones that are like $5, $10, or well, $5 or so, and it's shared, because just for a little bit more money, you could get a better quality cloud service, which may still be shared resources, but it's just on at a higher level where you're getting better quality hardware. So that you're not likely to run out of resources that easily, and there are less people typically sharing that space, right? So what I'm going to do without further ado is give you some tips on what to look for just when you're trying to set up a hosting service or looking for a hosting service to go with. So first of all, you need to choose the right service provider. Now, you of course could look at reviews online and so on, and of course you want to avoid the typical ones that are, like I said, are rock bottom pricing. GoDaddy is a culprit. A lot of people get sucked into their marketing and their pricing structure, where they just offer these really cheap hosting offers, but the quality is just not there. I have been on GoDaddy, and customers of mine have been on GoDaddy. You want to avoid those that are they don't essentially let me start with the hardware quality. What you need to look for with the hardware quality is you're making sure that they at least tell you what type of equipment they're using, right? So if they're not telling you the equipment that they're using, or you're not able to even if you ask them, it's not advertised on the website, but even if you ask them, they're not necessarily giving you details, chances are you're using the poorest quality hosting. It could potentially be like spinning hard disks, which is like very old technology now, because most of the hosting providers now are using SSDs, which is solid state storage or drives, and that is going to be much faster to get your website loaded. Of course, you might not get like a large capacity, because it's more expensive to operate those types of setups with SSDs, because SSDs are more expensive than older spinning disks. But that being said, you might not necessarily need a large amount of space if your website is just starting out. So you want to make sure that you're at least getting some SSD, NVMe drives maybe. These are like super fast. You want to also look out for the traffic allowance. So you'll see in the package that you choose that they might have, say, this many visitors per month, or they might say bandwidth. Just make sure that's adequate enough for you. Again, if you're running a small site just starting out and you don't expect a ton of traffic immediately, you can go with something that has a decent enough amount of bandwidth or traffic allowance per month. Now, the risk you run when you have a cap on this is that what will happen is that if you're running some kind of campaign online, like advertising or marketing in some kind of way, you might end up having a spike in traffic where lots and lots of people are coming through because you're promoting something, and it could crash your site. And this happens to like big corporations as well. When they're running a sale or something like that, it can crash a site. Or if somebody's just had, like a brand that's just had like some media exposure, like on national TV or something like that, and lots of people are coming to their website, it can crash the site. And this is just because they don't have enough bandwidth on the package that they're on to allocate to the amount of traffic they're getting. So that the servers are being overloaded, and the only way to solve this problem is to increase the bandwidth. But if you're on shared hosting, it's not as flexible to do it in real time or as quickly as that, because it's not designed for that. But with normal traffic situations, you should be fine. So if you can go with unlimited, if you find one that's unlimited, then that's better, because it doesn't cap you on the amount of traffic. But you might still be restricted by the other resources that I'll touch on, like the hardware requirements and stuff, or the hardware entitlements that you have might actually restrict you on that sense. So even though the traffic might not be capped, the more people that come to the site, the more resources is still going to need outside of what it says with the traffic allowance. So that's traffic allowance. Let's talk about inodes. iNodes is something that I learned about when I was on another cloud service provider that restricted this. Now, iNodes, as far as I understand it, is the number of files that's on your website. So if your website is pretty small, you're not posting a lot to it very often, it's probably not going to reach a certain amount. And iNodes or the file limit is not necessarily advertised. You normally have to dig in to find it, or you might just run into it if you're running a site where you're posting a lot to it, right? Which is what happened to me in the past. I was just running my site and then I got a notification from, it was SiteGround at the time. And SiteGround is pretty good hosting, by the way. However, it's just for my purposes. If you're running like, if you were doing something like what I was doing with the amount of files I was adding to my websites and stuff like that, I was quickly running out of iNodes, and then to upgrade to the higher plans was like not as cost effective for me. So I went with another solution, but then I'm a more advanced user, so I understand that. But for, you know, a typical person, typical businesses, they might not run into that issue, but it's just something to bear in mind. Okay. You want to also think about the, if they tell you, let's go back to the hardware. One thing I forgot to mention is they might actually allocate a certain amount of RAM, what is it? Random access memory, not ROM, RAM. So the memory, just like in a computer, you might have a certain amount of RAM. Like in my laptop, I might have 8 gigs or 16 gigs of RAM. That is just to be able to run the amount of programs that I have running simultaneously and keep that like open. Keep those open, right? So servers operate in the same way for your website. So I would say if you have a choice with the RAM, to go with like 1 to 2 gigs of RAM, if this is something that you have a choice in. Again, if they don't tell you, just like with the storage space, the hard disk or the drive space, because it could be an SSD, it should be, they might not want to tell you this up front if it's super cheap, because normally you're just on the bare minimum. So if you could see this is a good thing. If it tells you, okay, you've got this amount of RAM, then you know that at least you're on most likely better quality hosting. And then the final thing that I've got for you, there obviously could be other tips that I could give you as well, but these are the main ones, is the customer services, right? One thing you could do is look up reviews and see what people are saying about their customer services, see that they have users, make sure that they've been around for a while. You don't want to put your eggs in the basket of a new host that hasn't got a track record, especially for your money sites or your mission critical sites. Okay, I've recently lost a site. Well, I'm in the process of, I'm hoping that I haven't completely lost it. I've got backups, but not the most recent backups from when basically the site went down. But it was a project that's not like mission critical anyway, so it's not a big deal for me. But I went with a new host for this particular project that they've only been around for like a very short time, only for a few months, and they were running these really special promotional deals to get users on board, including a lifetime deal with limited resources, right? And I took that up. I took the offer, and sometimes you have to gamble with these, but I just used it for like a testing ground or to host like something that's not mission critical. What happened is that their servers went down. My site's not accessible, and when I tried to go to access the site, first of all, their site was completely down, so I had no way to log into my account to see what's going on, and I ended up having to go to their Facebook page to only to find out that they got hacked or got breached. And what happened is that someone went in and deleted a lot of their servers or their server resources, including their customers' data, their sites, etc. Lots of files got lost. And I'm guessing that one of those, my site is amongst those files that got lost, because you know there's no way for me to tell. Then just wait to see if the site comes back online spontaneously. So these are the risks that you take when you go with like the cheapest option or options that are risky, or perceived as risky. So I'm not going to necessarily give you any recommendations here, but because what I do for my clients, if you don't know, I run a small web agency where we set up websites and manage websites for our clients. And what we do is we just handle the hosting for them. So part of the service is that we offer hosting with our plans, and depending on what service they're going with that we offer, that's lumped in. Or we might recommend, if they want to host on their own, we might recommend certain hosting to go with, because we want to make sure that their site's running fast, they have the ability to get good quality service and so on, right? Considering all of the points that I've mentioned before. So, you need to, is it worth you setting up your own hosting and stuff like that? It just depends on where you're at in your journey. If you're just starting out and you just want to spend the time, if you've got time on your hands and so on to do it, then fine, you can go and test it out. And then when you're ready, there's always the option to go with a service provider, go with a service that handles all of that for you, which is certainly what we do. And this is not a commercial for my web agency, but I just wanted to mention, whether it's my service or somebody else, it's just better to have it handled for you, because there are a lot of technicalities when it comes to hosting, and if you don't know what you're doing, you're just going to run into issues that you can't handle. And if you don't have the support behind you, then that's a big problem, especially if you're running a business that needs to make money. So that being said, taking into consideration all these things that I've mentioned before, and if you want to learn more about anything to do with website strategy or your organic online content strategy so you can grow your business or your brand, check out one of my other pieces of content linked on screen if you're watching the video, or in the description. And I will catch you in the next one. Speak to you soon.